You are listening to the Common Ground podcast, where social justice topics are discussed so that mutual solutions can be considered. This program was created by me, Ziggy Kozicki. You can join these conversations by following Common Ground podcast on Facebook. This program was created through the facilities of the MCTV network, a service of the City of Midland. Charter, DirecTV, MCTV, and the City of Midland are not responsible for the content of this program. The views presented do not necessarily represent those of Charter, DirecTV, the City, or MCTV. If you would like to learn about creating community podcasts like this one, contact MCTV at 989-837-3474. Thank you. Welcome to U.S. Common Ground. I'm Ziggy Kozicki. Today's program is a continuation of our discussion about democracy. My guest today is going to be John Helge, who will be able to provide some additional information that maybe we can all think about with regards to what we can do to build a stronger democracy and why it's important to have one. And democracy is one of those things that sometimes people don't really understand. It's a system of government where power rests with the people. And in order for that to happen, you have to have common ground, obviously. And democracy is when people rule directly through freely elected representatives. That means you have elections. And it ensures decisions reflect the public will, not some authoritarian leaders' will or some particular small group of people's will, but the common people's will. And it protects the rights and freedoms, the core principles that are important for sovereignty, but also for political equality. And it respects the rule of law. And it really hinges on the rule of law being enacted and followed for it to continue. It's government of the people, by the people, for the people, involving active citizen participation, free elections, checks and balances, and respect for human rights. That's what democracy is. And it's not just waving a flag or saying that you're a patriot or wearing a hat that says, "Make America whatever again." It is a form of representation that really makes people accountable. It involves and asks for participation of citizens. It's civic engagement and it's responsible leadership, all working together to create policies that benefit everyone. John, welcome to the program. I know you've made comments in a previous program, but let's continue with this idea of what democracy is, and maybe also touch on what you had spoken about in the past, which was that democracy's being threatened. John, welcome.
Thank you very much. And Ziggy, thank you so much for what you're doing here with these podcasts. It's interesting. I deliver Meals on Wheels here in Manistee County, and many times I go into the client's home as I'm delivering the meal. And you know what I see on television? I see Fox News. And it seems to be that it's on 24/7 in many of these homes. And that's kind of a shame. And it's really nice to have a podcast like this that gives the alternative option there. And I really appreciate what you are doing in bringing this to the people and where everybody is doing it. Democracy is messy. It's sausage making. My grandfather was a butcher up in the UP of Michigan. And I remember being a young lad going in with him, and he worked at a little Red Owl store, 3-aisle Red Owl store right in downtown little village in the UP. And sitting back there with him, he would say, "Well, today we're going to make sausage." And he says, "Don't move. You sit right here on this stool." And I was watching him put stuff into the basket. And it was not the best cuts of meat. It was, boy, there was a lot of stuff going in there that I would have thought, wow, that should end up in the garbage. But it all got ground up. It got, mixed with the spices and everything and put in the casings. And boy, I'll tell you what, as soon as he put it out in this display case, it was gone in a couple of hours. People really liked the sausage that he made, but they wouldn't have liked it so much if they had to watch it being made like I did. And that's kind of what's going on right now, both in Lansing and in Washington. They're legislating is sausage making, but legislating is absolutely critical. It's part of our Constitution. We have 3 branches of government. We have executive, legislative, and judicial, and they all are equal in power, and they all have oversight responsibilities. And what happens when that power shifts one way or the other, we lose, the workable democracy that was intended to be.
That's the checks and balances. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we expect that to operate because we can't trust that one person or even one group of people really has the best interest of everybody or even understands things. I mean, you and I both remember a number of wars that have taken place over time that were illogical to begin with, and maybe the methods of dealing with those things was not really well thought out. We learned from all those experiences, and people now, when they go into those kind of situations, really thoroughly examine the cost benefit, the alternatives, rather than just pronouncing an attack. But yeah, we just had one take place that really surprised everybody. Congressmen who are part of that checks and balances weren't even made aware of the fact that we were attacking another country. And the War Powers Act, 1973, requires the president to let people know about that. And Section 8 of Article 1 of the Constitution requires Congress to declare war before you can actually go to it. Because, even the founding fathers didn't want the United States wandering off into wars with everybody without some debate and consideration for what it was going to do to people's lives. So, yeah, you're right. We have a situation now where checks and balances are being tested.
Yeah, and listen, what happened this past weekend in Venezuela? The spin, and it's spinning like a top. Believe me, the spin is put on this is, oh no, this is a judicial matter. This is, we're going in there to get someone who is under indictment by the U.S. courts. And okay, but why did we have to, send in over 100 aircraft, put at risk a lot of American soldiers? And Lord love Delta Force and all the great work they do. This is a highly trained, highly effective military organization. I'm very proud of it. I'm ex-Army. Believe me, glad to see them do their mission effectively and efficiently. But it's just incredible what's going on there because our legislative branch has abdicated their responsibility. So we don't have balance of power. We don't have that. We don't have it in the courts right now because our Supreme Court has decided that, they've given all the power to the executive branch. They said, as a president, he's immune from any criminal activity. And that's just crazy. And, we got a legislature right now. We got a House of Representatives that are afraid to speak truth to power. And we don't have, the Democratic Party does not have a majority in either House or Senate, to be able to take meaningful action. That's why November of 2026 is going to be so important. Because if we take back the House and we get, I'd like to see a 60 seat Senate, be senators. We can get stuff done. And we can stop this authoritarian rise, by a person who has a malignant narcissist is really what our current president of the United States is. And we just need to stop it.
Well,
And the
some
only way to
people would-
stop it, yeah,
But
if
some
I could
people would say
finish.
he's a strong leader who gets things done.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I hear that crap all the time. A strong leader who gets things done. Absolutely not. He is creating problems that then only he can fix. Okay? That's not strong leadership at all. That's ridiculous. That's
Okay. Well, you know,
beyond the
you're
pale.
talking about democracy. All
Yeah.
modern democracies include free and fair elections. Okay.
Yep.
Rule of law.
Which we have, by the way. We have free and fair elections. I have no doubt in my mind.
Okay.
You know, the 2024 election, Trump won. Am I happy about it? No. But it was a free and fair election.
Okay. Rule of law and constitutional protections. And you're saying that the rule of law is being skirted or in some way no longer reflects what the Constitution requires. Individual rights and civil liberties and checks and balances. So let's look at those individually here to see whether the idea of democracy being threatened or abolished does exist if those things are. So free and fair elections. Are we having free and fair elections?
Yes, we are, but there is work afoot right now to inhibit voting by some people. This so-called SAVE Act that's out there is going to make it very difficult for women who are, especially married women who have taken their husband's name when they got married, to be able to register to vote, because they're going to have to, come up with their birth certificate, marriage license, all this stuff to go to the clerk's office to register to vote. And that may not be as simple as, many of us believe.
Is that so that they can't vote? Is that the intentions here?
No, the intention is just to prove that you're a citizen of the United States, and that you can vote. But your name, my wife took my last name when we married. Okay. But when she goes to register to vote, if we move from where we live now and she has to re-register, she's going to have to go with her birth certificate. She's going to have to go with a wedding license in there. Whereas before, all she had to do was show her driver's license. And if she was new to the area, maybe just a, electric bill for her house to prove that she lived at that address. The things that are being done by Republicans in state legislatures to make it harder to vote are just out there because they know that when people are voting, they're going to vote more for Democrats than they are going to vote for Republicans.
So
that's
fewer
just
people means that they have more of their candidates winning. What about the rule of law and constitutional protections? Those are factors. How is the rule of law being managed in the current circumstances?
So right now, in many of our larger cities, we have masked people jumping out of unmarked vehicles, grabbing people off the street, throwing them to the ground, zip tying their hands and putting them in a van, and they're disappearing somewhere. Many of them are disappearing to the prison in Baldwin, Michigan, and their families don't know where they are, don't know what their status is. And many of them are being deported without due process. That's just a sad situation. That could happen to you if you were in a foreign country, for example, and were taken, off the street and thrown in jail or thrown in some kind of confinement. There's no due process there. But in America, you're supposed to have due process, whether you're a citizen or whether you're here visiting, whether you're here legally or illegally, you have due process. And that's just been thrown out the window.
Yeah, I think that people fail to realize that one of the reasons that the United States broke away from a monarchy was there was no due process. There was no constitutional protection. British soldiers could pick up anybody and do anything they wanted with them, transport them anywhere they wanted. and there's no repercussions. The people in this country eventually got very upset with that and said, we have rights too, and that's when we had a revolution here. How about individual rights and civil liberties? I mean, and here, this is kind of a touchy area because we have many different groups who want to be respected. We have gay rights, we have women's rights, we have minority rights, we have religious rights, we have, I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, depending on who you are, where you are, you have a right to exist, to practice your religion or practice your politics or uh, who you love or whatever. But yet, these kinds of things now seem to be being put through the sausage machine again, if I can use that uh, analogy that you used. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, Ziggy, these rights that you talk about, it's not pie. If somebody gets their inalienable rights, it doesn't mean there's less for you. That's one thing that people have to understand. And nobody's asking for more. They're just asking for their fair share. And that's the point. We've had this throughout our history. It started, with the with the whole racial justice aspect, and it's now moved, yes, into LGBTQ plus rights. Absolutely, they're not asking for more. They're just asking to have the same rights as you do, and we should celebrate that. We should say, yeah, that's the way it should be. And you're not going to, just because my gay friend is getting treated like I am, doesn't mean that you who are not gay are getting less. And the same thing goes for religion. If I'm very proud to call myself a Christian, okay, but I also respect other religions. I also respect people who may be atheist or agnostic. I don't want anybody telling me, what to think and how to pray. And you said it right. Nobody should be telling us how to pray. Nobody should be telling us how to live, how to love. The only thing about how to live is we have to live within the law. We have to live so we don't hurt other people. Okay, other people in the society that we live in. I'm not necessarily a socialist. I call myself a societalist. We live with other people. The days of the rugged individualist, the Western cowboy, the people who are going to, leave and go find that, acreage out back and live off the land. Those days are pretty much over in a country with 380 million people. We have to learn how to live, work, play, and love with each other. And that's the society that I want and hope for and I'm working for.
Yeah, I do want to mention that in forming this democracy, we can't forget that we enslaved millions of people who we abducted from their homeland, brought them here, and made them labor for the growth of this country, and that we killed and essentially created genocide for the native people that were here, killed millions of native people in order to take their land. And even when we had agreements with them where we gave them something in return for their land, we violated those agreements. And so this democracy that we have is not ideal and not pristine. And even though there have been rules about how we're supposed to comport ourselves, this country was really formed on the backs of slaves and on the graves of the native people who were buried in the quest to expand this country. So there is a past that we can't forget. And hopefully we've learned something from that. But those violations are real and they can't be hidden. They need to be looked at as something that we did wrong and we should never do again. I want to talk about checks and balances, though. That's the other thing. It seems as if Congress just is not doing their job. What's your thoughts about it?
Absolutely, they're not doing their job because because we have a viable democracy. We don't have one party rule. Okay, we don't have one party in place that is absolute power in our legislatures. Okay, you see it in the state of Michigan. We've got a Democratic Senate majority and a Republican House majority. In the U.S. Congress, yes, we have a majority of Republicans in the House, a majority of Republicans in the Senate, but our Senate, because of the filibuster rule, they hold things up a little bit. You got to have 60 instead of a 51 majority to get laws passed. But because of that filibuster rule, nothing's getting done. Nothing getting done. Is this last Congress, or this Congress that we're in right now, is the least productive Congress in history. We expect people that we elect to go to Washington or Lansing to get things done for the greater good of the people. When they don't do that, when all they're doing is collecting a salary, that and getting benefits that far exceed what the normal voter that sent them there has available to them, this is not a good situation. So I hold the Republicans that are in the majority in Washington, I hold them accountable for not doing their job, for being too cowardly to speak truth to power, to stand up for what's right, to stand up for the people that they represent. And the polls show it. This current administration in the White House has the lowest poll numbers, of any president at this time in their time in office. And the people are speaking. The people are very upset. I think that will all come to fruition in November of 2026, but it's going to take a lot of more work. We can't let our foot off the accelerator. We've got to continue to push. Got to continue to work on educating voters and reaching out to people to get engaged.
Yeah, I was taken by the fact that the most frequently cited threats to democracy include extreme political polarization, attacks on the integrity of elections, the spread of misinformation, and the potential for executive aggrandizement and the erosion of institutional checks and balances. All that seems to be taking place right now. And
kind of looks like the playbooks in action, isn't it? You sometimes wish the Detroit Lions had as effective a playbook as that, don't you?
Well, they're learning how to win, and certainly they have much more to probably learn. But we're at this position right now where many people are confused about what's going to happen next, and whether or not a democracy is going to survive. Getting back to Benjamin Franklin's famous quote, "It's a republic if you can keep it." And I think many people don't realize that, as you pointed out, they're just words. When I took my friend from Germany to look at the U.S. Constitution, he thought those words were powerful, that they created the United States, they created democracies across the world, provided an example for how the Germans could reconstruct after World War II, moving away from a fascist, authoritarian, dictatorial political system to one in which there's people making decisions based on all of the applications of democracy that they can find. But now we're at a place where we have people who don't understand that there's a difference between waving a flag and actually supporting a democracy. And I'm just wondering now if in this time that we live in, if people are going to be prepared to take that next step, which is to return to democracy as an active part of their lives. You know, democracy should be our common ground. We should be getting together to talk about the things that matter to us more than anything else. We should look forward to town hall meetings or opportunities with the school board or in our city councils or any place else to talk about the things that are going to affect us, affect our children, and get involved. But I just see this apathy that or lack of interest. And you know, the thing is, just like you and I are talking now in this podcast, we have so many means to communicate and to share now that we didn't have before. You don't have to go to a town hall meeting. The town hall meeting can come to you, but you got to turn it on. You've got to get involved. And people don't have newspapers anymore. They're not really well informed. I talk to people all the time who don't know anything about what's going on. They're completely blocked out of the process that's taking place all around them. But they know that certain things are changing. Prices are getting higher. Things are getting more difficult. Jobs are going away. There's all kinds of things. They see those things, but they don't understand that those are related to the whole democracy political process. You know, what can we do to fire up a flare and get people engaged again and coming together for some common meetings and some come on, let's get together and talk opportunities.
Well, therein lies the challenge, Ziggy. That is exactly the problem. And here's what complicates that. Today's economy, the young people that are out there that are raising their families, that are just starting off in their life career, the husband and wife both are working full-time jobs, and they're trying to raise a family. They don't have time for politics. They don't have time for that. They're more worried about putting food on the table, paying the rent, paying the electric bill, paying the heat bill, finding childcare that they can afford so that both of them can work so they can afford the lifestyle that they grew up in. These are the challenges that are out there. It does not lend itself.
Does that mean that those people who don't raise children, who don't worry about those things, have to be more involved, more actively engaged, looking out for their children and their grandchildren and for others, and need to actually become more of a force? Who's going to fill the gap? Who is going to be the active participants in this experiment we call democracy?
Yeah, I honestly believe that people will, if they're given the opportunity. If we give them more opportunities like this right now, like this podcast, like the work we're doing here in Manistee County to help educate voters, help them meet, listen to, talk to candidates that are running to earn their vote in the November election. These are the kind of things that we need to work on. We need to understand that we just can't, hold a meeting at 7:00 on a Thursday night and expect the place to be full of young people. I want those young people at home, reading bedtime stories to their kids, not worrying about, things like that. But they do need to understand that there are people out there willing to work for their benefit, for their good. Part of the challenge we have right now, it's so easy to be cynical. And cynicism is, the opposite of skepticism. Skepticism says, okay, I don't know if I believe that. I need a little bit more information. Cynicism says everything is bad. Everything is in the crapper. Okay. And it's so easy to be cynical. Okay. These days.
Okay. So if we can move away from cynicism, we also need to realize that Gen X, born between 1965 and 80, millennials born between 1981 and 96, Generation Z, born between 1997 and 2012, and Generation Alpha, born between 2013 and 2025, are going to inherit whatever it is that the baby boomers and those before them have left them or haven't left them. And it seems to me as if the responsibility of preserving democracy falls directly on the shoulders of people who aren't busy taking care of their children and having to take care of all these other things. And they must, at this particular point in time, take a realistic look at what's going on and make some decisions to work together to land this democracy on its feet again. Otherwise, all those generations aren't going to have a democracy, and they're going to be living in an authoritarian state, which is something that I personally don't want to leave for my children.
Absolutely. And, I'm a proud Democrat because I care about other people. I'm doing a lot of what I'm doing, for my grandson.
Okay. I got you.
And,
well,
and
look at
a lot of people I talk to the same way.
Okay.
But,
so
the authoritarian aspect, if I could, the authoritarian aspect of it is the easy way out. Okay. As long as I think there was a saying that under Stalin, the people in Russia were happy as long as there was bread, as long as they had bread.
It wasn't very good bread. I've been to Russia.
No, but bottom line is that's where it goes. It basically devolves to that level. As long as I've got my basics, I don't care what goes on in Washington. I don't care what goes on in Lansing. I've got mine. Screw the other folks. I'm happy with what I got. And that's a sad situation. And many of us that are the boomers, the ones that were fortunate enough to do better than our parents in our life, in our careers, that is where we are. And I agree with you. We need to get up off, the couch and get out there and work hard to make sure that our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, have a democracy, have a planet that they can live on and thrive in. And that's the point. And that's why we're going to rise up. We're going to show people in November of 2026, what can happen. You can call me Pollyanna. You can call me, glitter in my eyes, but I don't have glitter in my eyes. I got steel, and we're going to do it. It's going to happen. We're going to make it happen.
Well, John, I hope you're right. Again, if you have comments, please leave them for us at our Facebook site, US Common Ground, facebook.com. And I'm sure that if you're interested in contacting John in Manistee, he's easy to find. John Helge at the Democratic headquarters in Manistee, Michigan. Thank you for listening into this podcast, and please listen to some of our other podcasts. We'll be looking for ideas from you also for future podcasts. Again, let's find some common ground together. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for listening to the Common Ground podcast, where social justice topics are discussed so that mutual solutions can be considered. This program was created by me, Ziggy Kozicki. You can join these conversations by following Common Ground podcast on Facebook. This program was created through the facilities of the MCTV network, a service of the City of Midland. Charter, DirecTV, MCTV, and the City of Midland are not responsible for the content of this program. The views presented do not necessarily represent those of Charter, DirecTV, the City, or MCTV. If you would like to learn about creating community podcasts like this one, contact MCTV at 989-837-3474. Thank you.